And so former RNC chair Michael Steele said voter ID is rigging elections. Voter ID is when you want to rig an election. That's the former chair of the Republican National Committee. So here's MSNBC. Listen to how Nicole Wallace of MSNBC, perhaps the dumbest anchor on television, introduces the segment with Steele on voter ID. It's a clip set up for the rest of the other actual clips. Here it is.
The GOP's dirty effort at voter suppression is where we start this hour. Aaron Haynes, editor-at-large at The 19th, is here. Also joining us, my friend Michael Steele, former RNC chairman, and the aforementioned Mark Leibovich, chief national correspondent for The New York Times.
Dirty setup. I mean, so get this. In Maryland Matters, this is a paper that is left-wing run and left-wing funded in the state of Maryland. Sometimes the Baltimore Sun will pick up stories from this, and so you will never find a Republican story in Maryland Matters. It just won't. You won't find a story that favors a Republican or favors policy that is more conservative in nature. So it says Steele joins call to wrestle control of the Republican Party from extremists. And rather than reading the article, you can only imagine what the article says, because it just talks about the extremists, meaning anyone who voted for Donald Trump, anyone who believes in voter ID, anyone who believes in, not endless elections, that there's actually an election day and it ends at the evening of the election day, and you don't continue voting like 5 days later until you get the result that you want. So here is Michael Steele. And they're going to go to these two panelists because I know they can't wait to talk about these voting laws in Georgia. Here's Michael Steele's take on Georgia's voting laws. Here it is.
You can start with the question to the party. So what the hell are you afraid of? If you put out good candidates, you put out a strong message, you have principles and policies that align with where America is. Why do you need to rig the system so you can win? And as we've already seen from the 2018 election, rigging the system doesn't get you the win.
Voter ID is rigging. What do you think about that?
I think it's safe to say that our rights to vote are precious and they are of great value. My bank account is of great value to me too. But I'll be daggum if they're going to let me come in there and cash a check without an ID. And the idea that anybody walks around the United States with an ID these days is ludicrous. And it's actually, once again, it's insulting to say that, well, the minorities or this group doesn't have an ID is absurd, because I have never met anybody that doesn't have an ID. And it's just another way of trying to divert people into their narrative that if a Republican wins, it's because we somehow stole the election and we asked people to prove who they were.
And more specifically, stole it from people who are Black, which is what Michael Steele is suggesting, which is why this is so disgusting, right? Because here is someone who's, I believe, a Harvard educated, I'm not sure if he's an attorney or not, but I think he went to Harvard. And so he's not a dumb guy. He's a very smart guy. And he knows what he's saying is a lie. And it's so wrong to suggest that the people in the states who happen to be Black don't have an ID or are too dumb to show up without an ID.
Well, African Americans survived slavery. They survived Jim Crow, Democratic Jim Crow laws, but they can't get an ID. I mean, this is about securing the elections, about making sure that we do have continued peaceful transfers of power because we have legitimacy with our elections. And then for him to come out and say that, well, they're changing these laws to rig it, I would ask him the same question. Why did big tech need to shut down and censor Republican candidates going into the election? Why did the media need to squash the Hunter Biden story? That was obviously true, but yet they pulled the plug on it. Why did states that were really toss-up states need to change their election rules midway through
without the legislature?
Without the legislature
doing it.
You had not mass mail-in voting, you had mass mail-out voting. Why are they rigging the election? And then when you question it, you're extremists.
You're part of the party that is the extremist part of the party because you believe that voter ID makes elections more secure, which makes the country as a whole understand and feel like the election was fairer. And when you have a populace that believes it's more fair, then you have more of a secure democracy, right? Because then people are buying into what you're doing. But here's the guy that was the head of the RNC, and he's still playing the Democrat game, which is black people can't get an ID because they're black. What? I mean, it's stupid because in most states, certainly let's speak to this state. If you can't get an ID in this state because you don't have any money to get it, the state will provide you one for free. So you can get an ID. It's pretty straightforward to do it. Plus you can vote. You can vote the day of the election or even absentee if you want without an ID in the state, as long as you have enough time to provide the ID at a later date. You can actually show them an ID. They can come back and cure your ballot. So,
well, I mean, Democrats have been very effective at turning election day into election month.
Yeah.
You can, I mean, we even had a bill in the General Assembly this year that put a voting drop box in a Baltimore booking precinct for criminal. Now, I know that's criminals are a strong constituent group of the Democratic Party, and they want to take care of them. I mean, we did have a good friend, Delegate Mangione, had a competing bill that would put drop boxes in senior centers, and that didn't make it into, never made it out of committee.
Oh, no, of course not.
Yeah.
Yeah, because seniors have a tendency of voting more Republican, and convicts have a tendency of voting for Democrats. Hey, Maryland Matters. You should write that story. I'm just saying.
It's their same playbook they're always in, and it's all about creating division, chaos, and putting more questions on every election. So no matter what happens, they can ask questions and say, "Well, this happened because of this." There's nothing that they pass or they stand behind that instills greater confidence in the integrity of any election, and that's their whole game.
Distorting, distracting, and demonizing.
Yes, and by the way, it's working. Right? Because it certainly worked this last election.
I was down in Georgia for that special election. I went down there personally and did some campaigning on behalf of the RNC. And I just wanted to see what it was like myself. And it was really, really telling how Democrats label you and distort, demonize. I mean, I was asking questions about David Dupree or Kelly Loeffler, and they labeled them a bunch of racists, and they were, white supremacists, and then they would respond by talking about marginal tax rates.
Because it all stops legitimate debate. Yeah. They don't want to debate. They don't want to talk the facts. They just say,
"You're
call you a supremacist or an extremist, that you have to shut up, and we'll stop debating."
Brian, isn't this also because more Black Americans are voting for the Republican Party?
Absolutely.
And it's increasing each election. And even if, and this is important for podcast listeners, even if it's just 1% more or 2% more, the fact is that's been happening over the past 20 years. The Republicans continue to get more and more people voting for them who are Black. And that is cutting into the key base of the Democrat Party. Michael Steele knows it, and so do the Democrats. So they have to get this wedge in there.
Well, that's part of its reaction, right? And I mean, the fact is, the Republican Party now is way more diverse, with more African Americans voting for it, more African Americans identifying as conservatives, more Latinos are identifying with the GOP than ever when Michael Steele was the head of the GOP.
Well, certainly we have more diversity of thought.
It goes back to the political class. Where's the political class get their power from? They get their power from these government programs that leave people generationally poor and poverty-stricken forever. And when we have a flourishing economy, and that's what happened under Donald Trump, whether anybody wants to believe it or not, and all of a sudden everybody was walking up the economic ladder, and that scared them because they're like, "No, you can't do it on your own." We all believe in a flourishing populace of people starting to really be I guess.
Oh, you're absolutely correct. I mean, their policies have proven to have people live slightly better in poverty, more comfortable in poverty, but not really getting anyone out of poverty.
The Republican Party gains nothing by you being in poverty. I promise you. The only people that ever gain anything are the people gaining their own power by inventing new programs year after year after year that never work.
Case in point, I just saw a meme, and we posted on Mark and the Millennials online. And it's a meme of this lady who's got a mask on outside while she's pumping gas in her car. But the gas pump that she's pumping and using has that big yellow plastic bag out of it, which says out of order, but she's still trying to use it anyway. And then on the back of her car, it says Build Back Better, which is with the Biden Harris.
Well, Joe Biden said he was going to get rid of fossil fuels, and he managed to do that. I didn't know he would do it over a weekend.
So here's Michael Steele's threat to the Republicans in his state of Maryland. We have that clip, and here it is.
And the truth of the matter is, if I'm, in one of those states, I'm looking at those Republicans I elect to the state legislature when the next round of voting comes, because those are the individuals the Black community should know do not want them to vote, and have made it very clear they do not value that vote. So when those Republicans stand up and come to you next year talking about how, y'all go to church on Sunday, y'all must be conservative, and, Black unemployment is the lowest it's ever been under Republicans, remember who gave you access to the ballot box and who tried to take it away from you.
Yes, so Michael Steele, I hate to tell you this, Michael, but the Democrat Party was the party of slavery and is the party of Jim Crow, and the Democrat Party is now the party that doesn't believe in voter ID because they say it's part of Jim Crow? No, actually it's not. Voter ID is part of making sure actual elections are secure. But he's got the whole thing backwards.
I mean, I thought the majority by percentage, more Democrats voted against the Civil Rights Act.
They did.
than the other way around.
And this is somebody who went to Harvard.
Well, Harvard's not what it used to be.
Yeah, well, so is CNN. CNN and MSNBC's not what they used to be either.
I think he went to Hopkins and Villanova.
Yeah, that's right.
He did.
But that's Michael. Go ahead.
What was with the Southern accent? That always bothers me. But when they're describing any Republican, all of a sudden we're just a bunch of white rednecks.
Yeah.
I mean, did you hear that in his voice?
Well, he also threatened you. He said that if you're in a state legislature, remember, this guy wants to run for governor of Maryland. If you're in a state legislature and you want voter ID, then you are an extremist and you're trying to rig elections against Black people. And therefore, he's going to make sure that you get unelected. This is their idea now. This is their idea, that theirs, as in the Democrat Party. It's not uniform across the Black community, but it's the far left progressives who want to basically get rid of the Republican Party and blow it up. This is what I'm saying. This is a battle, and we have to win this battle. The people like Michael Steele, they need to go.
Well, it is the soft bigotry of low expectations, because who does he automatically assume doesn't have IDs?
Yeah,
Nobody said that. He just automatically assumes it's going to be in the Black churches where they don't have ID. How do you only make that conclusion by assuming that these people don't have IDs,
that they're too dumb to have IDs.
That is the soft bigotry of low expectation, and
it's unbelievable.
It's a disgusting trait to have, in my opinion, especially when we see so many people that are beginning to flourish and people that become self-dependent and starting to live the American dream. They can't stand that because it starts to chip away at the political class and their power.
It's so true.
I just don't see this on the ground, though. We're in the media, people at MSNBC are telling us we're having a civil war among Republicans. I'm like, really? There's a couple goofballs that are paid to say this. Very self-serving, disingenuous.
Like Michael Steele.
Michael Steele. Now, I can't think of somebody more self-serving. I said that. and then they're trying to drive a false narrative to benefit the left politically. I mean, that's where they're at. So I just don't see this on the ground. I think the American public is smarter than this.
They are. So here's Michael Steele calling Donald Trump, of all things, a rhino. We have that clip, and here it is.
The going after Karl Rove is hysterical because everyone in the party knows what Karl Rove has done. He's certainly not a rhino, just like Liz Cheney isn't a rhino, just like I'm not a rhino. The only rhino is Donald Trump. That's the crazy part.
That's right. So that's Michael Steele, right? Whose entire career has been about blowing up the conservative wing of the Republican Party. And of course, it's my opinion that the Republican Party is really the conservative party now, and has been for quite some time. By that, I mean since Ronald Reagan. Without question, it's been the conservative party. And then occasionally we get these country club Republicans who come in, who try to take it over, and they ruin the party's opportunity to get elected at all levels. But now you have Donald Trump, who's an outlier, and God knows Donald Trump has his faults. I mean, but he's an outlier. He's trying to bring the Republican Party into the place where it's both conservative and blue collar. And Michael Steele doesn't like it. Donald Trump's the rhino. Karl Rove, of all people, he's the good guy.
You're a rhino. I mean, that's his response to. I mean, is that?
Does he understand what rhino stands for? Is I guess my question.
Republican in name only. I thought it was what it stood for. Rhino's been a long term. Republicans have had this problem for a really long time. I went back and looked it up one time. It was 1865. It was when that term first came about for. It was used against. Well, it was used against Republicans that were standing in the way of the 13th and 14th and 15th Amendment. They were acting like Democrats, Republican in name only. So it's been around for a long time. The Republican Party wasn't established until 1854. So we've had problems with rhinos for a really long time. I guess it takes one to know one. I mean,
I think Mark makes a great point, though. We're talking about going back to Reagan. I mean, the most popular presidents we've ever had as Republicans in recent history were Reagan and then Donald Trump. And it was because they believed in principle and they were conservative driven. People like Michael Steele, these ones that always want to walk the middle of the road. And I think Mr. Miyagi said it best in Karate Kid. Walk one side of the road, fine. Walk other side of the road, fine. Walk middle of the road, squish like a grape. And that's where Michael Steele wants to take us. Squish like a grape.
I'm not going to touch Mr. Miyagi on that one. But that's when you got me on that. So voter ID, is it really rigging? Of course. And that's Michael Steele. And that's what he believes. I mean, he believes that if you're conservative and you want secure elections, that you are someone that has to go.
If it walks like a duck and talks like a duck,
exactly.
It's probably a duck. And that's what I guess our point of this podcast is, and I want people to realize is, I mean, he's being paid to say this stuff. No other Republican that I know is against voter ID.
Not a single one. I agree. Not a single one.
And a good portion of the Democrat Party people that you talk to.
Right. They want to know that their elections are secure because this is one of the reasons why in America that we've had peaceful transfers of power, because we know that if we don't like how the government's going, we can walk into the voting booth 2 years from now and change it. But if you can't, and we see there's this theory among Republicans that in socialized countries or in communist countries that they don't like elections. That's not true. Most dictators love elections. It's their chance for getting pat on the back.
Because they know what the outcome's going to be.
Yeah, right.
The outcome's always going to be the same.
99% Hugo Chavez.
Yeah, right.
Right.
So why do you suppose that Michael Steele and MSNBC, they never talk about educational opportunities and freedom of choice in education, educational choice? I mean, they're so hyper focused on voter ID, but they never talk about
maybe they're not pro-choice.
The true conservative principle of being able to have money follow the student, and the student gets to go to any school that he wants to or she wants to. Michael Steele, here he is. He's a black guy, right? He's obviously lived a very privileged life because he went to Harvard, and he's on MSNBC, and he's always virtue signaling, but he never actually brings up the true policy issues that are going to make a big change in the black community that are truly conservative beliefs. And if anything, I'm sure he wants to purge those people too, because we, the conservatives in the Republican Party who want school choice, pose the biggest threat to the Democrat Party nationwide ever because of school choice. They won't even talk about it.
The freedom to choose where to go to school should be what us as Republicans champion, and we should continue to champion, because that is freedom. There was 580,000 people that died in the Civil War fighting for freedom. And all we're saying is we are automatically paying $15,000 to $18,000 per student in the state of Maryland for each student. Shouldn't that student, even if it's the portion of it, be able to take that money and make the choice with his parents and figure out, hey, this school is not right for me. I'd rather go to this school. And I think it just opens up so many more opportunities for kids to learn in the environment that they want to learn in. Because over the last at least 60 days, I've gotten more calls about what's going on in the public school system than anything else. And it's because parents are fed up. They are fed up with what their kids are being taught. They're fed up being told their kid can only go back to school for 2 days, or he's got to be in this lottery. I can't take it anymore. I'm taking my kid out and sending them to private school, which is, the Maryland Constitution does guarantee that we offer public education. Well, if the product is horrible, well, what good is that policy? And I think that anytime you give greater choice, it's a free enterprise equation.
Absolutely.
It's a better quality product that leads to a better opportunity for everybody.
It's very well said, but Michael Steele will never talk about that. He'll never talk about the real policy issues, as I said before, that actually matter, that will make the biggest change to move us forward as a society, particularly if you're Black and you're in these places like Baltimore City and other cities where the school systems are just horrible and you have no choice because the money doesn't follow you.
Well, Democrats for a long time have thought the theory that if you control education, you control the future.
Right.
Exactly.
And that's what they're really scared of, is it's about control.
It is.
And then once again, you have another topic that Michael Steele is on the Democratic side about. And this is a major point of view, decentralizing our education system and putting parents back in charge. As a society, we all want children educated because it's a benefit to our entire society. I don't necessarily think we care who educates them, and we should have parents decide that. And you look at some of these kids are, like you mentioned, Baltimore City, they're in perpetually failing schools. We pour more money in there than you can shake a stick at year after year, and nothing really seems to change. And, this is, what did Einstein quote saying? This is insanity, doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result.
And MSDE has that. They have their own grading plan, and it's 1 through 4. And if you're a 1, it means nobody is graduating that can do math or
exactly.
or
It's
read.
terrible.
And if you remember, that bill came up last year, and I wanted to put an amendment that if you were in a school with a 1, meaning nobody is graduating that can read or write, you should get the opportunity to go to another school. And I got accused of busing.
But Brian,
on the
voter
floor.
ID is the problem.
Yeah.
The problem is you're not able to learn because of voter ID.
That's
because
right.
that's the problem. Because the conservatives they want you to have voter ID. That's why you're not learning. It's always diversion. It's always diversion that the Democrats have been engaging in with the Black community since they were the party of slavery and Jim Crow, and they're continuing in today, except that the new plantation are the really failed public schools. And there are very few of us in the legislature, or any legislature, by the way, who are actually willing to say what I just said, but they know it's true.
Well,
and if anything, they fear having that debate.
Well, they fear having that debate, and really it's the Republicans that need to be taking it forward, because Democrats at this point, they can't do it, they won't do it. You only have to pull the teachers union donation records, and you'll quickly find out that the entire party is ran from teachers union dues.
You mean they've never given you a donation?
Shocking, never have given me a donation. Matter of fact, I want to say the last time I pulled those records, it is close to like $200,000 to $200,000 to Democratic candidates, and I think it was less than $1,500.
That's statewide, right?
Yeah.
Well, last
to
year
Republican
they were
candidates.
the highest donator to all the lobbyists, and it was over $1 billion. It was I think it was in the Capitol or Maryland Matters that put it in there.
Yeah,
Unbelievable.
It's tons of money. It was for the Kerwin bill that we're experiencing in Maryland. It was supposed to revamp education, and you sit there and look at it, it's like, well, there's nothing earth-shattering in this bill. It's a lot of false promises and no ability to pay for it.
Exactly.
At twice the price tag.
Right, and
That's
then
right.
you sit there and look at other states that have done really, really well with educational freedom, where the money follows the child through a school choice voucher program. Places like Florida that spend half the amount of money and get better results. And
Exactly.
you know what? I do agree with Democrats. Every child does deserve a great education, and what's preventing that is their policies.
Always. That's absolutely. That's the final word on that subject. But